Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to break down a word that's been absolutely everywhere lately. A word that hits your wallet, your savings, the whole economy, really. And that word is inflation. So let's jump right in.
Okay, I want to start with just this number, $550 million. Just let that sink in for a second. What could you buy with that? A private jet? A couple of mansions? Well, the answer is probably not what you're thinking.
You're seeing that right. In 2008, that was the price of a single loaf of bread in Zimbabwe. They were in the middle of something called hyperinflation, where prices were literally doubling almost every single day. I mean, can you imagine? This is inflation at its most terrifying, most extreme, where money basically becomes worthless overnight.
So that crazy, mind-blowing example, it leads us right to our big question for today. What exactly is inflation, and how does it work in a regular economy? You know, one that isn't totally off the rails.
All right, let's bring this back down to earth, to a scale we can all relate to. Think about this. Back in 1970, a gallon of gas was about 36 cents. By 2021, it was over $3. A new car went from around $3,000 to more than $40,000. And look at that new home price. The point is, it's not just one or two things getting more expensive. It's this broad trend across the whole economy.
And that's the key thing to remember. Inflation isn't just when the price of your coffee goes up one morning. It has to be a general rise in prices, so lots of different things, and it has to be ongoing. It basically means that, on average, your dollar buys a little bit less today than it did yesterday. So you might be thinking, how on earth do they measure that? I mean, with millions of prices, for millions of products all wiggling around constantly, how can you possibly boil all that down to just one number? Well, it starts with a really clever idea called the shopping basket.
Yeah, so economists basically invented this concept of a basket of goods and services. Just picture a giant shopping cart, and you fill it with all the typical stuff an average family buys in a year. We're talking everything from milk and bread to gasoline, rent, movie tickets, and doctor's visits. The whole shebang.
And here's how it actually works, step by step. First, government statisticians figure out exactly what goes into that basket. Then, every single month, they go out and track the prices of about 80,000 of those specific items. Next, they add up the total cost of everything in the basket. And finally, they just calculate the percentage change from the month or year before. And bam! That percentage? That's the inflation rate you hear about on the news.
Now, this is really important. Not everything in the basket counts the same. Some things are weighted more heavily because we spend more money on them. Take a look. Housing is a huge slice of the pie, right? So a big jump in rent is going to hit that final inflation number way harder than a jump in the price of, say, bananas.
Okay, so we know what inflation is and we know how it's measured, but why should we care? What's the big deal? Well, here's the thing. Inflation doesn't treat everybody the same. It quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, creates winners and losers.
Just think about it for a second. Imagine if one morning we all woke up and every single price, every paycheck, every bank account, everything just magically increased by exactly 20%. Would anything really change? Nope, not really. But see, that's not how it works in the real world. In reality, things change at different speeds, and that's where the trouble starts. So on one side, inflation can really hurt people who are holding on to cash, or especially people on a fixed income, like retirees with a pension, because every day their money buys a little less. But here's the twist. It can actually help someone who has a big fixed-rate loan, like a mortgage. Why? Because they get to pay back their old debt with new, cheaper dollars that are worth less than the ones they borrowed. It's this weird, unintended way that inflation can actually move wealth around.
And here's a perfect real-world example of that. The federal minimum wage. The nominal wage, that's the actual dollar amount, has gone up a lot since the 1960s. But if you adjust for inflation, the real wage, what that money can actually buy you, has often gone down. So even though the number on your paycheck might look bigger, your actual purchasing power, your ability to buy stuff, is actually smaller.
Now, when we're in a period of high inflation, it's easy to think, wow, this has never happened before. But the truth is, this is a challenge that economies have dealt with for a very, very long time. Let's get a little perspective.
If you look back at U.S. history, you can see these huge waves. You get these big spikes in inflation right after major wars, like World War I and II. Then you have the Great Depression, where the country actually had the opposite problem, deflation, where prices were falling. And of course, there's the famous Great Inflation of the 1970s. You see this cycle. Booms can bring higher inflation, and recessions often bring it way down.
And listen, this isn't just an American story, not by a long shot. High inflation has been a massive problem all over the globe. The UK hit almost 25% back in the 70s, and countries like Russia and Brazil have gone through absolutely staggering periods of hyperinflation in recent memory. We're talking thousands of percent.
So all of this history, all of this theory, it brings us to right now, to today. Knowing what we know, what can actually be done about it, and what should we be thinking about as we look ahead?
Well, one tool countries use to take some of the sting out of inflation is something called indexing. It's a pretty simple idea, really. It just means that payments get automatically adjusted to keep up with rising prices. You see this with cost of living adjustments or COLAs in some union contracts, or how Social Security benefits go up each year to match inflation. It's basically a way to try and protect people's real purchasing power.
And that all leaves us with the big, multi-trillion-dollar question that's on everybody's mind right now. After all the chaos of the last few years, was the big spike in prices we saw just a temporary blip? A weird side effect of messed up supply chains and stimulus checks? Or is it the start of something more serious, a return to that painful high inflation era of the 1970s? The answer to that question isn't just for economists. It's going to shape the value of your money for years to come.